This program is rated PG and may contain mature subject matter. Viewer discretion is advised.
Much of our modern world owes its existence to British ingenuity.
The impact of the UK on culture, on industry, on the way we live today cannot be overstated.
British innovators have revolutionized how we move,
Steam engine opened up a brave new world.
how we communicate.
Computing is a British UK invention.
They've kept us healthy,
We cannot survive without penicillin today.
changed how and where we live, and even how we play. It's hard to imagine a world without British inventions, but that's exactly what we're about to do. To discover the pivotal role they've played in shaping modern society, we're about to erase key British contributions to transportation, technology, and medicine.
Without the UK, our lives today would be completely different.
It'd be mass chaos on a global scale.
You would see an absolute breakdown of civilization. You would see the looting in the streets. You would see rampant crime.
The world would be a terrifying place.
This is History Erased, the world without the United Kingdom. Spread across a handful of windswept islands in the North Atlantic, the United Kingdom might seem small for a superpower. And even though you could fit 40 UKs into Europe, don't let its size fool you. When it comes to making history, they don't get much bigger than this.
You trip over history everywhere you go in this country. It's a small place, and so much has happened in that small place.
This tiny island nation composed of England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland played a key role in creating the modern world.
The whole developed world has modeled itself on the United Kingdom. Without it, we would not have the technological society we know and love today.
To see just how big an impact the UK has had on the modern world, we're about to launch a unique thought experiment. Over the next hour, we're going to remove, one by one, key British innovations in technology, medicine, and communications. Their disappearance will remake the world. It will touch almost every person on the planet and plunge the life of one into real jeopardy. The abduction of this young woman from a wealthy family will illustrate the chaos that might unfold and how difficult it would be to find her in a world without the UK. As we're about to see, much of the modern world owes its origins to a British invention from the 18th century, and it all began with a cup of tea.
By the early part of the 19th century, everyone is drinking tea. So is James Watt.
A 27-year-old self-taught engineer, Watt was about to change the world.
He's boiling water and the steam is making the lid bounce up and down. And he gets the idea that perhaps steam can be harnessed in some way to drive various kinds of apparatus.
Building on an earlier, simpler device that used steam power to drive a piston that pumped water out of mines, Watt revolutionized the machine by adding gears and wheels.
The first steam engines really just pumped up and down. But once you work out how to attach it to a wheel with the pistons, you can get rotary motion. Once you get rotary motion, you can start using it to turn wheels. Once you can turn wheels, you can create an amazing amount of machines.
Suddenly, you've got machines that almost have limitless power. We don't need humans to move things or animals anymore. Suddenly, the world gets faster.
Watt's engine kicked off the Industrial Revolution, a new era in history that led directly to our modern technological age.
The Industrial Revolution and the steam engine basically created that switch. It flipped the world on its head. It was a time when industry and mechanical machines took over the methods of production on a grand scale.
Steam engines based on Watt's designs powered massive factories used for everything from textiles to steel. As British factories pumped out more products throughout the 1800s, manufacturers needed to find a better way to move them. Once again, British steam power provided the solution.
The number one thing the steam engine did, and it's the first thing that comes to anybody's mind, is the locomotive.
Over 1 million kilometers of train track now crisscross the globe, enough to build a line from the Earth to the Moon and back. And each day, in India alone, these tracks carry over 21 million riders. And it all started with one man. British inventor Richard Trevithick took the steam engine to the next level when he introduced the Puffing Devil in 1801.
The Puffing Devil was the granddaddy of the locomotive.
It was this ghastly monstrosity to those who saw it, and it terrified local people.
When the first one blew up, Trevithick created another version, and then added something that remade the UK and then the world. Train tracks.
Tracks are put across the country to connect every possible business together. The railways become these great arteries along which the entirety of power, people, and goods can flow around the nation.
By the mid-1800s, the rail line spurred an economic boom that helped turn the UK into a financial powerhouse. But its impact was felt far beyond the British Isles. It played a pivotal role in creating modern Germany and Italy. It helped unite the States of America and settled the wilds of Canada. The trains helped drive the explosive growth of something else as well. As hundreds of thousands left farms to find work in factories, the modern city was born.
They came into towns, and you create places people wanted to be. You have schools, you have learning, you have industry, you have commerce. Suddenly, the world is conflated on certain small points rather than being spread out across the entire countryside.
A steel industry powered by steam engines pumped out the key ingredient needed for another British innovation. One that would become the symbol of the modern metropolis. The skyscraper.
The skyscraper has been one of the great modern ideas, building as high and as lofty a place as possible.
But that dream only became possible with the advent of an iron frame outer structure, another British innovation.
Now, often we think about this as being a New York thing, but actually the first iron frame building was built in Shropshire in a little village called Ditherington on the edge of Shrewsbury.
Built by Charles Bage in 1797, this flax mill is perhaps one of the most important buildings on the planet. Hoping to protect it from fire, Bage made history by building the frame out of metal, not wood, making it stronger and lighter than previous buildings, and paving the way for every skyscraper to come.
Without these first buildings here in Shropshire, you wouldn't have some of the great buildings we see today. We wouldn't have the Empire State Building. You wouldn't have the buildings that now create all of the skyline of Singapore. The world's cities would look drastically different.
And without another British innovation, life in these cities would be impossible. By the 1850s, as thousands flocked to London to find work in new factories, the population had reached 2 million.
The amount of waste and garbage was magnified enormously.
And much of that waste was ending up in one place, the Thames River.
In 1858, you could practically walk on it. I mean, it was awful.
London's main water source became a breeding ground for disease. Thousands died as cholera and typhoid stalked the city. Once again, British ingenuity saved the day. In 1858, Joseph Bazalgette created a vast system of underground pipes and pumping stations that finally kept London's waste out of the Thames.
He builds pumping stations and huge infrastructure beneath London. And a result of this, of course, is that the cholera epidemic is completely cured.
Now, we can't possibly know how many lives that saved in the long run, but I imagine it's millions, possibly even tens of millions.
Bazalgette's sewer system was soon adopted by cities around the globe.
All the great cities of the world begin to take a page from the London book on this.
But sewers weren't the only thing British innovators carved beneath London's streets. In 1863, Charles Pearson inaugurated the world's first subway system, the London Underground. Now, over 100 million people a day use subways running under every major city on the planet. British innovations like the steam engine, sewer, and subway have made life in the modern world possible. Now, to see just how important they are, we're going to shut them down all over the world.
If we erased the UK's infrastructure and the copies of it worldwide, it would mean everything would come to a dead stop.
Every area of our lives would be affected.
Ladies and gentlemen, we regret to inform you that until further notice, all trains are out of service.
Millions are stuck in suburbs, commuter towns, and villages, unable to get to work. Thousands of trains hauling oil, coal, and natural gas needed to power cities have ground to a halt. In the cities, millions of commuters are trapped with no way to get home, no place to stay, and with a sewer system that no longer works.
If the sewers were to stop, we would be at the mercy of the parasites that live within our waste products. It would be apocalypse waiting to happen in terms of infection and illness.
It would be devastating.
A world without key British innovations like trains, subways, and sewers would be chaotic, crowded, and filthy. But it's about to get downright dangerous as we pull the plug on the British invention that drives the modern age. We've launched a thought experiment to explore the importance of British innovations. Removing key British inventions like the train, subways, and sewers has plunged much of the planet into chaos. Thankfully, the world has another British game changer to help navigate the mess. Its removal will be felt globally, but will have terrible consequences for this one young woman.
Computing is a British UK invention. We owe it all to them. Every single aspect of our lives is touched today by computers, whether we know it or not.
Computers have revolutionized how we live, and everyone owes their existence to two British inventors from the 19th century. The mathematician and astronomer Charles Babbage, and one of history's great unsung heroes, Ada Lovelace.
She is unbelievably exciting. She comes from this line of almost mad geniuses. She's the only legitimate heir of Lord Byron, that incredible poet, that philanderer, that romantic that captured imaginations. When Ada was growing up, her mother was genuinely concerned that insanity might be passed down to her. And so she channeled her daughter into a very, very different area. And instantly she was fascinated by mathematics.
In the 1820s, Babbage was trying to create a machine that could compute massive equations needed for accurate astronomical calculations.
The initial idea of the computer comes from Charles Babbage, who came up with this notion of a mechanical device with pulleys and pumps that would allow it to do numerical calculation.
He turned to the brilliant Lovelace to make his so-called analytical engine work.
She was really the world's first computer programmer. Babbage built the machines, she wrote the software.
Essentially, all programming is a stepwise sequence of commands to get you to a result, to get you to a solution, whether it's getting a mouse through an electronic maze, whatever it is. And it was Ada Lovelace who really first realized that using numbers, you could do this.
Which set the wheels in motion for the development of the modern day computer.
Without those two people, everything we rely on today, from smartphones, telecommunications, streaming video, everything would disappear.
Today, the computers they helped create are the heartbeat of the modern world, driving global transportation and connecting us all with our friends and family. They even keep us safe, something they've been doing for almost 80 years. 1939. Europe was burning. As Hitler's armies stormed into Poland, an outnumbered and outgunned United Kingdom entered World War II.
The Germans were in complete control of Western Europe. The UK was the last stop.
Desperate for an edge, the UK realized it must break Enigma, the top-secret machine that was generating code and helping coordinate the Blitzkrieg.
The Germans had this incredibly sophisticated machine to encrypt their messages called the Enigma. And this changed every single day. So even if, as a code breaker, you could break the code one day, the next day it would be completely different, so you'd have to start all over again.
The impossible job fell to a team at Bletchley Park, the United Kingdom's top-secret code-breaking facility. The work was spearheaded by Alan Turing, a brilliant 27-year-old mathematician and early computer scientist.
As a young man, he's known as one of the top mathematical brains in Britain.
Turing realized that the only thing capable of breaking Enigma was a machine. Building on the work of Babbage and Lovelace, and with the help of an army of unsung female codebreakers, he set out to build one.
The women of Bletchley Park today are famous for their contribution to the war effort. At that time, they were working in secret, so nobody knew who they were. These women analysts, code breakers, were crucial to Britain winning the war.
Months later, Turing and his team produced the so-called bomb, consisting of 100 drums, 10 miles of wire, and almost 1 million soldered connections. Turing's machine unlocked the secrets of Enigma. With the ability to read German messages, the Allies knew where the Nazis were going to be and when. The tide of the war began to turn.
We can say that with certainty. It brought the conclusion of World War II forward, possibly by as much as 2 years. And that is millions of lives in real terms.
We very likely would have lost World War II, at least as far as Europe was concerned. We would now have the Third Reich being dominant power in Europe.
The machines pioneered at Bletchley Park also paved the way for every computer, laptop, and smartphone on the planet. And it was another UK innovator who helped connect them all in 1989.
Sir Tim Berners-Lee is rightly seen as the father of the World Wide Web.
The internet is computers linking up, talking to each other. The World Wide Web are the web pages and the hyperlinks and the websites that you see on the internet. It's the system by which we use the internet.
Everything we do today comes back to this incredibly brilliant notion that documents should not be static, but rather should be active, alive, interconnected in a World Wide Web.
In its first 4 years, the web reached 50 million people. Today, there are over 1.3 billion websites and counting. To print out the entire web would take 136 billion pages of paper, enough to make a tower that's over 13,000 kilometers high. Computers and the web that connects them have become a key part of all of our lives. Now, as our thought experiment continues, we're going to turn them all off.
Immediately, if all computers were taken away everywhere, our technological infrastructure would fall entirely apart.
Life would be completely different.
As computers shut down, so do all the systems that rely on them.
Hello?
Like phones, air traffic control, power grids, cars, and banking. Desperate to get their hands on hard cash, these two resort to kidnapping.
You would see an absolute breakdown of civilization. You would see the looting in the streets, you would see rampant crime.
The loss of British inventions in computing and infrastructure has thrown the world into chaos. But the danger will only escalate when we pull the plug on more UK game changers. we've shut down key British innovations like trains, subways, sewers, and all the world's computers. As screens around the planet died, so did global banking. Angry mobs have taken to the streets, and some have turned to kidnapping to survive. Luckily, another British innovation exists that is working hard to restore order and track down the missing. The modern police force.
You have to help us. Our daughter's gone missing.
Trust us. We will find her.
But as we're about to see, that job is going to become much harder as we continue to remove British innovations.
We're so used to the idea of having a police force today. But if you go back to the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, there was no regular system for fighting crime.
As the Industrial Revolution sparked the massive growth of cities, crime rates spiked.
You would not want to walk down any street of London on your own at night.
The job of establishing order fell to British politician Robert Peel. In 1829, Peel helped pass a law that created the modern police force.
We still know Sir Robert Peel because everybody knows the idea of the London Bobby. Robert, Bob, Bobby, that's why we call them Bobbies.
When almost 900 Bobbies hit the streets, crime rates began to drop. The world took notice, and police officers started walking some new beats.
The London police force set the model for the entire world. Everybody copied it. They're all modeled on that original London police force.
Peel's professional crime fighters captured the public imagination, and in time, helped spawn the most popular literary form on the planet, the detective novel. Over the years, British writers have introduced us to dozens of famous crime fighters, but one looms over them all.
This is Sherlock Holmes.
Created by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Holmes cracked his first case in 1887 in the short story, A Study in Scarlet. Doyle's super sleuth is now the most filmed character on the planet, making appearances in a record-setting 254 movies and TV shows. But when it comes to global impact, one British wordsmith towers above them all.
The best-known writer in any language in the history of the human race is William Shakespeare. His use of the language, the poetry, the beauty, the wonderful pithiness with which he managed to encapsulate complex ideas became a model for human communication.
Born in 1564 in Stratford-upon-Avon, his 38 plays have been translated into over 118 languages, including Klingon.
Ta, pag, takbe. Dag moeilijk van bekennis.
4 centuries after his death, his work continues to inspire and entertain, and has spawned over 420 feature-length films showcasing some of the planet's biggest stars.
He's a genius because he managed to capture so much of the human condition. The raw human emotion that he shows in his comedies and in his tragedies. That is surely the meaning of life. Why are we here as human beings if not to try and understand our existence? And that's what Shakespeare was doing 500 years ago.
For me as a writer, his work is still so alive in the work that I do.
For centuries, British innovators like Shakespeare have helped shape our global culture. But when it comes to impact, few inventions can touch this next British game changer. On January 26, 1926, Scottish engineer John Logie Baird made history when he was the first to produce a live moving image from reflected light. With it entered the age of television.
Television has made the whole world accessible to every human being on the planet, and we owe it all to Great Britain.
TV brought history into our homes and let us celebrate our victories.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
And mourn our losses as one.
We need to feel that we are connected with each other. And the television does that like no other object. There's this human connection that you get with no other medium.
Television also launched a British cultural invasion. The shockwaves are still being felt today.
From London, the Beatles!
Formed in Liverpool in 1960, the Beatles have sold more than 1 billion records, making them the most successful musical act of all time.
Beatlemania wasn't just screaming girls, wanting to see them on stage. It was a whole planet sharing music for the first time ever.
Their 1965 hit, Yesterday, spawned 4,000 different versions, making it the most recorded song in history. The Beatles turned out to be the first salvo in an invasion that has never run out of ammunition.
The export of popular music from the UK is still massive. The UK has a great history of popular music export, and that cultural impact cannot be underestimated.
TV's also become a kind of global stadium where the world convenes to watch the most popular sport on the planet, and another gift of the UK, soccer.
Soccer stands as the world game, taken up everywhere.
While we've kicked balls around for centuries, the game as we know it today was created in 1863, when 12 clubs met at the Freemasons Tavern on Great Queen Street in London to set down the rules. It quickly spread beyond the United Kingdom, and now the so-called beautiful game belongs to everyone. It's estimated that half of the population watched the last World Cup, making it the most viewed sporting event on the planet. Today, TV remains a vital window into our world.
Around the world, governments continue to struggle to keep order following the collapse of global computer networks.
And for the police,
What did you see?
a valuable eye on criminal activity.
We're gonna have to see that tape. Let's see what we got.
But now, as our thought experiment
There she is.
and our kidnapping investigation continue,
Turn around.
we're about to pull the plug.
No.
The loss of key UK inventions has thrown the world into crisis.
Help me!
And we're just getting started. A world without key British innovations in transport, infrastructure, and technology has pushed society to the edge of anarchy and placed the lives of many in real jeopardy.
It would be the Dark Ages again.
Those tasked with keeping order now face an almost impossible job. And anyone trying to take the edge off with the UK's most famous tipple is in for a shock. Each year, distilleries in Scotland export enough cases of Scotch whiskey to build a bridge from Edinburgh to New York City and back 6 times. But now, it's all gone. Luckily, some old-school British crime-fighting techniques still exist. For now. Like fingerprinting. But in a world without computers, officers must now comb through thousands of records by hand, looking for a match.
Fingerprinting was a recognition that the whorls on your fingertips were an expression of each individual, and that none were alike, but that you could identify who the individual was by the trace of the fingerprint left behind.
Created from friction between the fingers of the fetus in the womb, fingerprints are set by the 6th month of pregnancy and are unique to every person, even identical twins. Fingerprints have been used to mark contracts for centuries. But in 1892, United Kingdom anthropologist Francis Galton realized they could be used for something else, when he scientifically proved that fingerprints were unique to every individual, and then created a system that could capture them. Then, in 1905, British detectives made history when they used fingerprints to help convict Alfred and Ernest Stratton of murder. The technique of matching prints to criminals spread across the Atlantic. And by the 1920s, the FBI had amassed a database of 5 million sets of prints, shared by over 7,000 police forces across the country.
One of the most important things of the Western justice system is that we don't want innocent people to be punished. And fingerprinting allows you to be pretty confident you've got the right person. You're not sending an innocent person to jail, you're only punishing the guilty.
But as crooks developed new tricks to cover their tracks, crime fighters got an even more powerful tool from the United Kingdom. In the 1950s, James Watson, Francis Crick, and Rosalind Franklin made history when they unlocked the secrets of DNA, the genetic code unique to every individual.
DNA is a nucleic acid that exists inside the very heart of every cell in the human body, and we think of it as the code of life, as the personal identity of every individual organism.
DNA is the secret to everything.
Consequently, it has wide applications well beyond medicine and has been applied, for example, in solving crimes.
Developed by British scientists in the 80s, DNA fingerprinting is now employed around the world to catch criminals.
Now all you have to do is brush against the wall. You've left DNA. You're constantly sloughing off skin cells. DNA is exhaled with your breath, for gosh sakes. Everywhere you go, you're leaving behind traces. Our ability to fingerprint people through DNA gives what every detective always wanted, an absolute way to identify or exonerate people involved with a crime.
It's just one of the many earth-shattering ideas put forward by British scientists. One of the most important thinkers of all time, Isaac Newton's work on gravitational forces paved the way for air travel, then spaceflight. Charles Darwin's revolutionary theory of evolution told us who we are and where we came from.
The fundamental truth of our biological reality is evolution. Darwin gave us that notion, survival of the fittest, natural selection. And without that, the whole modern field of biology simply would not exist.
And in the 21st century, physicist Stephen Hawking's brilliant mind took him and all of humanity on a journey into the farthest reaches of the universe.
The limit that confronts us now is the great void between us and the stars.
British thinkers even laid down the framework for modern democracy with the signing of the Magna Carta.
It established some really important principles. The king, or a president or a prime minister, is not above the law.
Had Magna Carta not been signed, there would still potentially be an absolute monarchy. There could potentially still be a horrendously hierarchical class structure, serfdom, slavery.
UK thinkers have played a key role in creating our world. But now, as our thought experiment continues, we're taking back more of their innovations.
Erase the Magna Carta and its anarchy. You cease to have a rule of law that's applicable to the most powerful individuals and entities. And in that circumstance, the little people are doomed.
And it's about to get even worse as we take away the UK's contributions to another vital field, medicine. To discover the impact that British innovations have had on our modern life, we've created a world where they no longer exist. The removal of key contributions to transportation and technology has crippled the planet and endangered the lives of many.
I need my medicine!
But the worst is yet to come as we start to erase key British medical inventions, like this one. It may not look like much, but the hypodermic needle just might be the most important piece of medical equipment in human history. It's the culmination of a scientific odyssey launched almost 200 years earlier by a brilliant British writer named Mary Montagu.
In the early 18th century, Lady Montagu traveled with her husband all over the world, and one of the places she lived was the Ottoman Empire.
There, she came into contact with a smallpox epidemic.
At that time, smallpox was endemic throughout all of Europe. Many people had been made blind by it, and many people died.
Having barely survived the virus in her youth, Montague was no stranger to the global killer that took the lives of 1 in 3 of its victims. In Constantinople, she saw something extraordinary.
She observed that the local people were collecting the scars of smallpox from people who had mild smallpox, and they were feeding it to their children.
Montague had just witnessed an early form of inoculation.
The idea of inoculating against smallpox meant that you would give a milder form of smallpox so that when you bumped into a case of a more aggressive form of smallpox, you would be protected.
Desperate to save her child, she deliberately infected him with a mild case of smallpox, and he lived.
She became an advocate for inoculation, and it became relatively widely practiced at that time.
Montague paved the way for a breakthrough UK physician Dr. Edward Jenner would make later in the century. Jenner learned from a milkmaid that farmhands that had been infected with cowpox, a harmless virus carried by livestock, never contracted smallpox.
And so he thought to himself, well, perhaps it's this exposure to cowpox which is preventing them from getting smallpox in the long run. Maybe there's a connection here.
To test his theory, in 1796, Jenner launched one of the most daring experiments in medical history. After exposing a young boy to cowpox, Jenner deliberately infected him with smallpox.
Lucky for Edward Jenner, cowpox protects from smallpox.
The vaccine was born and named after the Latin word vacca, for cow.
So through his efforts, he kind of spread this idea, and vaccination became a huge part of modern medicine.
The final piece of the puzzle was provided in 1853 by Scottish doctor Alexander Wood, when he invented the hypodermic needle.
He was inspired by the stinging mechanism of the common bee.
Wood's invention meant that millions could now be easily and safely immunized.
The greatest single lifesaver in human history is the vaccine. It's been credited as a conservative estimate of saving 800 million human lives.
Vaccines and needles changed the world.
I need my medicine!
Around the globe, every day, millions of diabetics rely on needles to inject insulin. And now, we're taking them away.
Where's the needle? Where is it?
I would be scared to live in a world without vaccinations. I'd be scared for my own children. I would be constantly afraid of the next epidemic that would rip through and kill 10% of the population. It would be a scary world to live in.
The needle also delivered another UK medical innovation, one that transformed medicine and may have saved your own life. In 1928, UK scientist Alexander Fleming was studying bacteria, organisms that can cause deadly infections.
Infection was the #1 killer of human beings. We had no way to fight infection.
That changed when Fleming entered his notoriously untidy lab to find mold growing on a sample of Staphylococcus, a type of bacteria.
And where that mold was growing, it seemed to be holding back the Staphylococcus. This mold itself was called Penicillium notatum. Now, what Fleming had discovered was the very first antibiotic.
It is one of the biggest breakthroughs in medical history.
He realized that, rightly harvested, then penicillin could be turned into a drug, an antibiotic, that could be used to treat people with bacterial diseases. And that's what happened.
Fleming's miracle drug brought humanity into the age of antibiotics.
It's impossible to judge how many lives the invention of penicillin alone has saved, probably more than any other single development.
Without it, we return to the 19th century, a time when a simple cut became a potential death sentence.
The world would be a very different place without antibiotics.
The world would be a terrifying place.
Our modern world has collapsed. following the removal of pivotal British inventions.
Literally, you have no modern world without those cornerstones of British United Kingdom contributions to science and technology. Take those away, and we would all be living what Thomas Hobbes, a famous British writer, said the lot of humanity was meant to be. Our lives would go back to being nasty, brutish, and short.
When needles, vaccines, and penicillin disappeared, life expectancy was halved, and humanity returned to an earlier time when our futures were uncertain. But thankfully, this was just a thought experiment. And now, it's time to return. To normal. As trains and subways roar back to life, millions can return to work. And as computers are switched back on, cell service is restored, reconnecting us with our loved ones, and giving crime fighters the tools they need to solve their kidnapping case.
It's her. You can't unwrite history, and you can't take away these pivotal individuals, these wonderful movements that came out of this tiny, strange island.
The impact of the UK on culture, on commerce, on industry, on the way we live today cannot be overstated. Gotcha. The world today would be a completely different experience if it wasn't for the things that happened here in these tiny islands.
The United Kingdom helped create the world as we know it. And as we move into the future, its work isn't done.
The UK has a long tradition of science and research, of innovation, of pushing new ideas, of pushing the boundaries, of saying we can make something bigger and better than ever before. Their contributions haven't ended. There's many more things to come out of the UK.
200 years ago, British innovators sparked a revolution in power. Now, they're set to do it again.
A lot of innovation is happening right now in the UK to try and harness the power of two great renewable sources, that of the wind and that of the waves in the sea.
The UK now leads the way in projects that will use undersea turbines to provide power to hundreds of thousands of people and their homes.
We are creating networks like the Climate Coalition, which combines thousands of charities across the country collaboratively to work together to save the environment.
And after helping forge a world of iron and steel, the UK has created a material that may remake the planet once more.
In Manchester, for example, there is wonderful work being done on graphene.
A wonder substance made from graphite. Graphene is just 1 atom thick and is believed to be the strongest material in the universe. 100 times stronger than steel and completely flexible. It's on the cusp of revolutionizing everything from robotics to medicine. Graphene batteries will charge within seconds and last a lifetime. And graphene strainers will one day filter out the salt from the oceans, providing billions with clean drinking water.
The UK's impact on the world has been almost greater than any other nation. Cultural things, industry, the communication methods, the systems of production, so much has enhanced the way so many people now live their lives today. And I think that we have an opportunity still to make a great impact, beyond our small size, and the future could be quite an exciting one.